Hi everyone, welcome back to Astrology with Lauren. I'm Lauren and I'm really excited for this week. We're going to be starting something new. I'm going to be starting a series where every week we dive deep into one of the planets, starting with the sun this week. I think this will be really fun. I hear a lot of people say, I don't resonate with my sun sign, I don't resonate with my moon sign, so on and so forth. And I'm one of those people. When I first started learning astrology, I said to myself, I just don't relate to a Cancer sun. It doesn't make any sense to me. And that's why it's really important to take into the consideration the whole chart. There's so much of the chart. We're complex humans, right? It's like an onion. So, we're going to be diving deep into each of the planets, and hopefully this will give you guys a better understanding of your planets, of their placements, how complex they are, and how many different circumstances really can impact your planets. So, like I said, we're going to start with the sun signs this week. We will dive into the moon next week, then Mercury, and we'll go in order like that. And I'll probably stop around Saturn. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto don't tend to have a super individual impact on us. So I'm not sure that I'll go any farther than that, although we'll see how things go. I mean, that's 7 weeks from now, so I might change my mind by then. But either way, we're going to start with the sun today. So the sun sign, your sun sign, is the sign that most everybody knows. Most people know, okay, I was born on this date and that makes me an Aries, a Taurus, so on and so forth. But what does that mean? What does that mean about us? What does the sun represent in astrology? So let's talk about it. The sun is our life force. It is the light that shines on the rest of the chart, the rest of the planet, the rest of the solar system, and flavors our chart. It flavors who we are, regardless of whether we feel super connected to our sun. It is there. The energy is definitely present. The sun is our ego. It's our identity. It is how we are perceived, how we are represented, and it flavors so much of the chart. So we are going to dive in this video to what it means to have your sun in different signs, and I'll probably break them up by elements, what it means to have your sun in specific houses, and what it means if your sun is aspecting certain planets. I probably won't dive deep into every possible aspect. That would take a really long time, but we'll talk about some general themes that'll hopefully give you an idea of how this different aspects to your sun are manifesting. So let's start with the fire signs. I feel like they'd have it no other way. The fire signs have a lot of energy. They walk into a room and they are present. Everyone knows they are there. Their energy is palpable. So the fire signs are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. Aries suns, the sun is, the sun is exalted in Aries, which means it's super comfortable there. It's almost like a king visiting another, this metaphor is not going very well. It's a king that's visiting, that's treated really nicely. It's like when you go over to a friend's house and you're almost waited on hand and foot. They have food for you. They have a place for you to sleep. It's comfortable. You know where everything is. So Aries suns, very comfortable in their identity and who they are, their boundaries. They can also be a little hot-headed. They're very passionate. I feel this falling, so I'm going to check on it. Yes, they are passionate, very passionate people. If they have an idea, if they have something that they want to accomplish, they are going to go out and get it, and usually don't have the capacity to kind of wait around. I wouldn't say very patient, which none of that is to be perceived or interpreted as negative. It works really well for them most of the time. So let's move on to Leo. Leo suns are also passionate in their own way. Leo gets pegged as the sign that wants all the attention. Again, Leo is the sun is at home in Leo, so it's also really comfortable in terms of who it is and how they want to express themselves. But I wouldn't say that Leo always has to be the life of the party, right? They might know how to have a good time. They might, be the friend that is dancing on top of a table. But that doesn't mean that they are always that way. And the most important thing for a Leo sun is validation, is being seen for who they are and understood for who they are. A lot of the need for attention is really rooted in that, really rooted in, my cat is here, really rooted in wanting to be seen, wanting to be validated, wanting to be understood. Sagittarius suns, again, also really passionate in their own way. Sagittarius needs a lot of different types of stimulation. They need different types of experiences and relationships, and they really learn through those experiences and through those relationships. They learn about the world, and they learn about who they are through that. They have a need for knowledge, for expansion. They want to collect all of these, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know the word that I'm looking for. So it's almost like they're collecting knowledge through these experiences. Like I said, they're learning about themselves through the world and interpreting themselves and the world through these experiences. And that can be through very stereotypical Sagittarian things like travel, spirituality, religion, or it could just be through their small everyday experiences, through reading a book, through listening to a podcast, talking to someone at a supermarket that provokes a thought or provokes something inside them. So those are the fire suns. Now that we have covered those, let's dive into the air suns. Air suns. We're going to start with air. The air suns are intellectual. They are social. They want to, similarly, they learn and experience through their reality. So the air suns, this is important to say, the air suns are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. So let's start with Gemini because they're all very different. Gemini is the talker. They're the twins. Similar to Sagittarius, because they're both mutable signs, Gemini can almost, I don't know if this is the correct term, but almost shape shift. Again, they need really different types of relationships and really different types of experiences. I think that's why they often get pegged as like cheaters, because one type of person isn't going to meet all of Gemini's needs. Again, they need really diverse friendships that represent different things. So Gemini is the sign of learning, of communication, of teaching. I don't know if you guys have ever had this experience, but I have a Gemini who's close to me who, when they learn something, they have to like share it immediately. They take it all in and then get it back all out. It's like, look at this cool stuff that I've learned. So very much about communication and teaching, whether that teaching is like legitimate teaching in like a classroom or traditional teaching role, or if it's just communicating what they've learned and what's going on inside their brain. So let's move on to Libra. Libra suns, also pretty social in a very different way. Libras are very relationship oriented, but not so much in the way that they are portrayed in mainstream astrology. For sure, they want to feel connected to their friends and partnerships and the people around them, but they're also really good at mediating. They have this beautiful ability to take a certain issue or situation or relationship and see both sides of the issue and look at it really objectively, to the point that they are able to see the flaws, the quote flaws in the issue or situation, relationship, whatever it is. And then they can take that and offer that feedback back to that person in a really supportive way where the person doesn't even understand that this is falling again. The person doesn't even understand that they're getting feedback, or they're being told, hey, you're doing this wrong, try this. I hope that makes sense, but I think the best way to put it is their ability to mediate, right? Their ability to say, hey, you over here, this is what you're doing wrong. Hey, you over here, this is what you're doing wrong. And let's work on that together. And the party that is receiving that feedback isn't typically super offended by it. Again, that probably depends on, your aspects to your son. So take that with a grain of salt. Take all of this with a grain of salt. If it doesn't resonate, of course, it doesn't resonate. If it doesn't resonate, there's nothing wrong with you. It just probably means that you have an extenuating circumstance that is different than what I'm talking about. Anyway, we don't need to get down that rabbit hole right now. The last air sign is Aquarius. So Aquarius isn't as bubbly or social as the other two. They are social, but in a very logical and more restrained way. Aquarius is observant. They are the observer. They are able to walk in to a job or a community of either friends or coworkers, whatever it is, and they're able to analyze it. Similarly to Libra, they're able to see what isn't working within systems. So it's much more logical. Libra is about relationships and about people, whereas Aquarius is more about systems. Like, what's wrong with this system? How can we make this better? And then Aquarius is able to come in, offer that feedback. Hey, this is what you need to do, and dip. They might not necessarily be the person that's going to implement the changes, but they understand and are able to see how you can better a community, you can better a structure. They are also a fixed sign. So sometimes they are a bit rooted, a bit stubborn in their way of doing things. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, let's talk about the earth signs. The earth signs are Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. So we will start with Taurus. Taurus suns this is also a fixed sign. So they are the bull. They are known for being stubborn and really rooted in their way of doing things, their beliefs, their patterns. The fixed signs want to maintain. So Taurus, ruled by Venus, is a very relationship-oriented sign, and they are definitely very reliable in terms of friendship, in terms of loyalty. They are one of the most reliable signs. If you ask them to do something or expect them to do something, they will follow through. Again, Taurus can be a little stubborn. So if, and this is a theme kind of in all of the earth signs, if you feel like there's a different way of doing something, like, hey, why don't you try approaching this situation this way? The Taurus is going to say, no, I have this established. I know the way that I want to do it. And thank you, though. I'm going to do it this way. And that kind of is similar to Virgo and a little bit of Capricorn, but we'll jump into Virgo first, where Virgo is similar. They have a rooted way of doing things. They're very grounded. All of the earth signs are very grounded. Oh, we might lose this little setup here. All of the earth signs are really grounded. So Virgo feels that they have the best way to do something. Hey, I have a system that really works for doing the laundry or taking out the trash or whatever it is. I mean, that's like, very routine stuff. It can be a bit more complex than that. But again, they are very rooted in, nope, this is how I want to do it. This is what works for me. So this is what I'm going to do. And with Virgo, they're the sign that's going to offer that feedback to you. Hey, why don't you try it this way? I have a way that works really well because I've been doing this for 10, 20 years, whatever. And here's what you need to do. And sometimes it can be interpreted as acts of service almost, or like caretaking. Like, here's this advice because I care about you and I want you to succeed. but sometimes it's just because they want things done the right way and they think that their way is the right way. So it all just depends on intention, but I think a lot of people with Virgos misunderstand the intention and think like, oh, it's just them being caring, which they are a really caring and kind sign, but that's not always their intention. So let's move on to Capricorn. Again, a very grounded sign, has a rooted way of doing things, but because Capricorn is a cardinal sign, they're a bit more flighty isn't necessarily the right word, but they'll bounce around. They're not as rooted per se as like maybe the Taurus might be in their way of doing things. So Capricorn is known for being very hardworking. It's a very hardworking sign ruled by Saturn. It is the sign of traditions, and Capricorn suns can be really rooted in traditions and wanting to get things done in the traditionally right way. And same for like family values as well. They have, again, it's a hardworking sign. They really want to provide for the people around them that they care for. And they can be workhorses a little bit. So the other thing that I want to talk about with Capricorn is they're a bit detached from their emotions, which this is a bit true for Virgo as well. Very rational. Capricorn is very rational in their thinking. They tend to compartmentalize. I can't deal with that emotion right now because I have this work that I need to take care of. I have these responsibilities that I need to take care of, and I cannot deal with that sadness or anger, depression, whatever it is. So a lot of times with Capricorn, the emotions get set on the back burner and they have a hard time processing those emotions. So let us move on to the water signs. This is our last set of signs, the ever patient water signs. And we'll start off with Cancer. Cancer is the first water sign in the zodiac, ruled by the moon. And all of the water signs are very emotional, very intuitive. They're intuitive. I wanted to check that again. Cancer is the compassionate, motherly energy. They are the one that is in tune with your needs. If they see something that needs to be done, whether it's in their job, in their relationships, at home, they will get it done. And there is a caretaking tendency with this sign. So making sure that their people are taken care of. I want to talk a little bit about the crab in terms of the crab having like a hard exterior and a squishy interior, because I think that's something that gets skipped over in mainstream astrology. Cancer, like I said, like the crab does have this squishy interior. They're very sensitive and very emotional, but not everybody's seeing that. The hard exterior and the ability for the crab, to go like side to side, it's a protection mechanism. They are very protective of themselves and the people around them, and are kind of able to like slip and slide out of certain situations that they don't want to be in necessarily. And I think that, in mainstream astrology, Cancer gets pegged as this overly emotional, like crybaby, which, can be the case for sure. Cancers can be really emotional, but again, the sun is the ego. So specifically a Cancer sun, there's that need to protect. The ego can kind of be that wall that comes up in order to protect. So let's move on. Sorry, I was looking at my notes to see where I'm at. So we just did Cancer. Let's move on to Scorpio. I don't know if I said the 3 water signs, but the 3 water signs are Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. So Pisces is a bit different. Scorpio, we're talking about Scorpio. Scorpio is a bit different than Cancer and Pisces in the sense that they're much more private. You're not going to necessarily see what goes on for a Scorpio as much as you might see it for a Pisces or a Cancer, if that makes sense. All 3 are pretty private, But Scorpio, my favorite metaphor for Scorpio is the iceberg. So if you imagine an iceberg, you see 10% of the iceberg above the water. So here's the water line. Let's imagine this is the iceberg. Then you've got 90% of that iceberg underneath the water. So you really have no idea what you're dealing with. You see 10% of the iceberg in front of you. And that other 90%, there is a lot that goes on, and that carries, it's a heavy weight. It's 90% of the person. So imagine with a Scorpio, you're getting 10% of them. And even in like Scorpio's most vulnerable relationships, typically they expect a higher level of vulnerability from other people, and their vulnerable experience isn't as vulnerable as they think it is. Let me explain. So a Scorpio could share something really vulnerable with you, and to them, it feels like they've bared their soul, but to the other person, it's not quite as vulnerable as one would expect. They're still very guarded in their vulnerability, if that makes any sense at all. But they like that. They like remaining mysterious and not wanting to give all give it all away. They don't want to show their cards. So definitely want to remain more private in terms of Scorpio. Okay, sorry. I have to take a sip. All right, last sign in the zodiac. The ever so patient Pisces. Sorry you guys are always last. Maybe I'll start doing you guys first or something for a fun change of pace. But Pisces, the most intuitive sign. They are so impressionable. Pisces suns are, I can't think of a better word than intuitive. You know, if you're a Pisces sun, you likely know things before you're supposed to know them. You walk into a space and the energy is palpable. You can feel the dynamics. What's going on in the room, what's going on between this relationship, what's going on between this relationship. Again, it's very intuitive. It's this sense of knowing that that's nonverbal. All of the water signs are nonverbal, by the way. So it's more about feeling rather than speaking or writing or talking. But Pisces especially is very nonverbal. There is a deep sense of spirituality, imagination. Boundaries are hard for Pisces. They have a hard time of knowing where you end and they begin, if that makes sense. Where they end, where you begin, so on and so forth. And very impressionable. Pisces need a lot of alone time because they take on the energy around them. So keep that in mind if you're a Pisces. I highly suggest prioritizing your alone time each day and finding ways of taking care of yourself, finding ways to set those boundaries for yourself in your everyday life so that you're not always taking on all of the energy that is present around you. Okay, so I was going to talk about the sun through the houses. We're already at 23 minutes, so I probably will zip through them a little quicker than I did the signs. Let's start with the first house. So the sun in the first house that would be the same sign as your rising sign. That I use whole sign houses. Quick side note. So if you don't use whole sign houses, it's possible that your sun could be in the next sign, but that's still your first house. So just remember that for when you're watching my videos, I use whole sign houses. So that means if your sun is in the first house, then it is your rising sign, which means it is doubly represented and doubly important. The sun in the first house has a sense of confidence, especially if it is close to your ascendant degree. You're charismatic, often really good in terms of leadership, and your sense of self is important to you, regardless of sign. Feeling really rooted in who you are is really important to you. So let's talk about the second house. The second house, the sun in the second house, usually these people are their identity is wrapped up in their belongings. And I don't necessarily mean that in like a vain way. It can be. It can be that you like to have nice things, but usually it's that your things have you have a sentimental connection to your things, whether that's like, a baby blanket that you had when you were a baby, or your great grandmother's rings that have been passed down, whatever it is, there's a sentimental connection to your things and your identity is connected to those things. The sun in the second house can be someone who spends a lot. If you have a desire, if you want something, you might not hesitate to drop a couple $100s on the new pair of shoes that you want, or a new handbag, or whatever it is. And again, I don't want it to sound vain necessarily, because it doesn't always have to be vain. It is an emotional connection to your things, if that makes sense. And you feel good about yourself with your things, if that makes sense. Third house is the house of teaching and communication. So having your sun in the third house, these things are really important to you. You may find yourself in a teaching role, or you may find yourself always being a learner throughout your life. The third house is more about short-term learning, so short-term courses, not necessarily like long-term degrees, but you might find that you're always picking up new habits and interests. I want to learn how to knit, so I learned how to knit. I want to learn how to garden, so I learned how to garden. Whatever it is, you're always learning through your experiences, and then you might go on to teach that thing to other people. The fourth house is the house of home and parents. So your space, your home, that could literally be your body. It could also just be the house that you reside in, and the family, usually your parents, your immediate family that is there with you, are really important to you. If the sun is really close to the IC, there might be a more private expression of the sun. The IC is the bottom of the chart. It's the most private area in the chart. So if your sun is really close to within a couple degrees of your IC, the expression of your identity might be a lot more private than, say, someone who had it up in the 10th house. Keep that in mind. I don't know if I feel finished with the fourth house. Essentially, the home is really important to you. Having a really safe space, something that you can come home to at the end of the day that feels comfortable and you feel secure in, is really important to you. And that same thing is true for your family relationships as well, feeling safe in them, having that sense of safety. All right, the fifth house. The fifth house, having your sun in the fifth house is so fun. It's so creative. You need a creative outlet. So if you have your sun in the fifth house and you don't feel like you have a way to express yourself, it's really important that you give yourself that. That could be through art. It could be through dance. It could be through writing. It could be any sort of creative expression is really important for a sun in the fifth house. Children may also be really important to you, whether you have your own children and you are a parent, or if you work with children or find yourself drawn to children in some way. Okay, let's talk about the sixth house. The sixth house, having your sun in the sixth house, your day-to-day routines are really important to you. You feel your best when you're able to get up and follow a structure that feels really good to you. Usually with the sun in the sixth house, my leg is asleep. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sitting awkwardly. Usually with the sun in the sixth house, following that sense of routine, following that sense of structure is really important to you, so that you feel prepared and ready for your day, if that makes sense. So that could be, just getting up, having a glass of tea, starting things really slow, taking care of your body by brushing your teeth, doing your hair, taking a bath, whatever it is. But it also could be that it pertains to health as well. You want to get up and go to the gym, exert some energy early on. Whatever it is, like I said, whatever your routine looks like for you, you feel really rooted and grounded in that routine, and you feel your best when you're able to operate within that structure. So let's talk about the 7th house. The sun in the 7th house, actually water. The sun in the 7th house, your relationships and your connection to the people around you is really important. Your identity is a bit wrapped up in your relationships and your connections. And the 7th house is the house of commitments. So this doesn't always necessarily mean like your marriage partner. It could mean that you, your identity is really connected to the partner that you're married to or committed to. But it can also be business partners. It can also be other partners in different areas of your life. But either way, there is this importance around, we almost fell. There is this importance around people and relationships. You may work with people. You may work in a job where you're meant to almost mediate or offer support, offer services, the service industry, social work, something like that may be really important to you as well. Okay, the 8th house. I said I wasn't going to spend as much time on these, but I feel like I'm spending just as much time. The 8th house. The 8th house is the house that takes things to this dark, deep depths that a lot of us don't understand. So having your sun in the 8th house, you really need to dig deep. You want to uncover the world's secrets. That might be through relationships, or that might be through your connection to the divine, to your spirituality, through tarot, through astrology, through, a connection to like your angels or your ancestors or whatever it is. There's this need to really dig deep in life through your experiences, through your relationships, so on and so forth. It also, your expression, your self-expression could be unique or kind of weird. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. But you might value being perceived as a weird individual or unique. Unique is a way better word. And needing that sense of identity might be important to you. So keep that in mind. 9th house suns. This is an expansion of energy. 9th house suns, they want to experience the world, learning through their experiences of other cultures, through travel, through religion. This is also kind of a spiritual house, similar, but like also really different than the 8th. Similar in the sense that the 9th house is like everything that is vast. It is this vast knowledge, or I'm just thinking about like the universe too, and how vast it is, and the connection to the spirituality is much more, words are failing me right now. At this point in life, I usually try and use like my visuals, but I'm not going to bore you with that. So the 9th house suns, they really need an expansion of energy to feel fulfilled. They want to drink everything up. And similarly to the 3rd house is, the 3rd and 9th is the knowledge axis. So the 3rd house, we talked about how it was kind of short-term learning. The 9th house is long-term learning. So the 9th house, having your sun in the 9th house, education might be really important to you. Getting your master's degree, getting your PhD, research over a really extended period of time is related to the 9th house. So your identity is really wrapped up into all that you're learning in these vast areas of life. In terms of going back to my connection between the 8th and the 9th The ninth is much more logical. So it might be this divine experience. But again, it's a learning house. So it's much more logical in its relationship to the divine or spirituality or religion. So it legit could be learning religion, like from a textbook, going to school for religion. It's much more, it wants to like touch the answers. It wants to have tangible answers rather than just the 8th house is swimming around this deep unknowing, if that makes sense. All right, 10th house, let's move on. 10th house is the house of career and passions. So having your sun in the 10th house, it's so much, it can be about the way you are perceived through work or through these passions. Sometimes the 10th house is having your sun in the 10th house is associated with fame, or having your sun conjunct the MC is associated with fame. And sun in the 10th house is a major leadership role. So you may be perceived as a leader, or if you're not necessarily uncomfortable as a leader, people might push you to be in a leadership position. But likely you're pretty comfortable with leadership. You're really comfortable putting yourself out there and taking up space, especially in terms of career or different areas of life that you're really passionate about. Okay, let's talk about the 11th house. Your sun in the 11th house, your identity is really wrapped up in your community, your friendships, the people that you feel connected with around you. And, your community could be like the city that you live in and the inner workings of that city, or it could be your small group. It could be your, 5, 6, 7 people that are your people that, you would have over for a dinner party or whatever it is. And having your sun in the 11th house, you want to go to bat for those groups of people. So whether or not it's like just a small group of people for you, or if it's your city, you may be inclined to notice bouts of oppression in your community, and really wanting to stand up for that group, that minority that is oppressed, and advocate for them. The 11th house is about advocating. So a lot of times your sun in the 11th house can be about advocating for those groups of people that you feel like are oppressed, whether that's, your one friend that, gets the short end of the stick in your relationship, or it's the homelessness community in your area, or domestic violence, so on and so forth, if that makes sense. Let's move on to the 12th house. The 12th house sun is a very creative space. It's a more private sun. The expression of the sun is a bit more private in the 12th house. It's also a bit more intuitive, regardless of the sign, because the 12th house is about our subconscious. It's about everything that we can't see in the world. So it's our subconscious, it's our psyche, it's our spirituality, our relationship to our spirituality and God, if you believe in God or angels or whatever it is that you believe in, the universe. And, similarly to what I talked about with the 8th house, where you're kind of swimming in this deep unknowing, the 12th house is similar, but the 12th house tends to be more associated with the subconsciouses of our personal mind. Sun in the 12th house people, they need a lot of alone time. They need the ability to pull back, process what has happened in the last few hours, the last couple days, whatever it is, and sift through it. They need that time to process and sort of shut off the stimulus around them. They also are projected on a little bit. They can be a mirror for the people around them, I think, because they're so intuitive. They tend to be a mirror for the people around them. So they may find themselves in predicaments or issues with people where the other person has experienced something. And to you, the 12th house sun, you may notice that that's not the reality at all. That they're projecting onto you. Whatever their issue is really kind of the issue they have for themselves. They might not have awareness around that. So keep that in mind. Definitely the most important thing for 12th house suns is that alone time, that ability to pull back into process. So I wanted to talk about aspects, but this is the longest video I've ever done. Apparently I just can talk for hours today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about aspects. I probably won't go in super deep, but we'll see. The aspects that your sun is making are also a really important thing to consider. So we've talked about the signs, we've talked about the houses, and the aspects can be just as important, if not more important, especially if your sun is in a tight aspect, a tight, hard aspect. If you're not sure what the aspects are, I highly suggest I have a video on the aspects. Please go check that out. But a brief summary is that the hard aspects are the square and the opposition. The soft aspects are the sextile and the trine. And the conjunction is neutral. So like I said, if you don't know what any of that means, please check out my video on the aspects. But like I said, if your sun is making a hard aspect, so a square or an opposition, especially with a planet like Saturn, Pluto, Mars, Saturn, Pluto, Mars. If it's making a hard aspect, that can definitely flavor the sun just as much as an easy aspect can to, a planet like Jupiter or a planet like Venus, where you're getting that strength from the easy aspect, almost like doubly, because Venus and Jupiter are the benefic planets. So the impression they leave in an aspect is much more positive, quote positive. So one of the things that I think is really important that I want to mention too is if you have a sun aspect with Saturn, the expression of the sun can really be dialed back, especially between like a square or an opposition. I mean, also for the easy aspects as well, for the soft aspects, but the expression of that sun, the expression of your identity, the expression of who you are can really be dialed back. So consider that if you've ever found yourself saying like, oh, I just don't resonate with my sun sign, especially if your sun sign is one of the signs that I talked about, like to take a lot of space, like a fire sign, whereas they're really extroverted and you've never necessarily identified with that. That could be true depending on the aspects that your sun is making, especially if it's making an aspect to Saturn. So trying to think if there are any other aspects that I want to talk about. I may film a second video on the aspects. I just think that this video I'm getting to the point where everything's getting jumbled in my brain. And I think if I dove deeper into the aspects right now, it wouldn't be worth either of our time. So let's see. Yeah, I think that I feel good about what we've covered in this video. And if I feel drawn to making another video about the aspects, I will. But please let me know, as always, if you guys have questions, comments, concerns, and subscribe. This will be a series that we'll be doing every week. So I hope that you guys found this helpful in terms of understanding your sun sign and how complex the expression of one planet is. Take your sign, pair it with the house, and consider the aspects it's making. I know I didn't dive deeply into that, but consider the aspects that it's making and really look into that. And I think you'll find that it explains you really well. The last thing I want to mention about the aspects, next week we'll talk about the moon, and I'm going to dive deep into the aspects between the sun and the moon because it's your moon phase. So we'll talk more about moon phase. So if your sun is making a certain aspect to the moon, keep that in mind for next week because that also says a lot about you. So like I said, let me know if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns. I really appreciate you guys. Please subscribe, like, share this with your friends. Your support means everything. So I'll see you guys next week. Bye.